You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photo Focus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host, the one, the only, Skip Cohen.
Wow, the one and only.
You are one of a kind, in a good way.
There are some people that would say, thank God, there's only one. Hey, we've got a great podcast today.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
We have a great guest, and I'm just going to jump in and do my little intro here. So if you go back to October of 2014, Rich Harrington had this idea. Actually, it was a little bit earlier than that, but that's around the time. Rich Harrington at Photo Focus had an idea of, let's do a podcast series. We couldn't figure out what to name it. And then one evening, I said to my wife, Sheila, what do we call it? She said, what's it going to be about? I told her. She said, well, why not just mind your own business? And that became, there it is, that became the name. So our guest was one of the very first to join us. And like I said, that was in October of 2014. Rosh Sillars is in the Mind Your Own Business house today. And it's a kick to catch up to him. He's a photographer, a consultant, a speaker, podcaster, writer. But for me, he's all about inspiration and motivation. So his focus is often on helping photographers develop a stronger presence. Everything he shares on his website, in podcasts, and on YouTube, interesting enough, actually applies to every business, not just photographers. So if you look at what we're all dealing with today, the pandemic has changed everything, and Rosh's multifaceted messages couldn't be more relevant than right now. We're going to talk about the challenges in helping you develop your and, one of my favorite concepts that Rosh has developed over the years. Now, just to set the stage, here's a better way to explain it, and I'm just going to quote one short paragraph from his website. Quote, the goal is to make your competition irrelevant. Finding your and is the solution. For example, a photographer develops a specialty, such as becoming photographer and writer. Maybe your passion is design, so you become a photographer and a designer, or a photographer and videographer. You get the idea? Close quote. So we're going to talk about your and today, and there's so many opportunities out there right now to help you build a stronger presence, not just because of the pandemic, but even with the pandemic. So Rosh, if I haven't screwed something up technology-wise here, welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Oh, it's great to be back. Thank you both for having me.
Welcome back.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I mean, it has been a while, but I think, Skip, you nailed it when you said that this is the time that all the things that I share and teach are, relevant, extremely relevant. And that's because a lot of what I teach was developed during the Great Recession. And that's what helped me grow my photography business during that time and to expand my career. And so, I think officially the and portion, what is your and, was when I was doing a lot of touring around the country, and I was talking with a lot of photographers who had just great portfolios, and they were coming to me with this idea. It's like, everything's changed. Something is different. I can't, what I had isn't there anymore. What can I do? And the thing is, there were also other photographers saying, it's hard right now, but I'm doing okay. And the one thing they had in common, the photographers who were doing well, was they had an and. They had something else, something that separated themselves from the competition. The days of just creating images that are in focus, well composed, and reasonably lit, that's not going to take you where you want to go. You need something more, and that eventually turned into what I now refer to as the combination code, which encompasses a lot of other things.
Oh, this is getting juicy already. Rosh, what's interesting is that Skip mentioned in 2014 you were on this podcast. You were actually on mine back in 2014 as well. Just to throw that tidbit in there.
That's right.
Yeah, March 2014. Yeah, right. It's, what is this? Everything comes full circle. And I love that a lot of your strategy was built developed during the Great Recession, because we're kind of going through something like that right now.
Exactly. It's a little harder, though, now in some ways. Go ahead.
It is. There are unique challenges, and I can't wait to dive into our discussion of finding our own individual and for our photography businesses. But first, can you just back it up and give us tell us about your background, how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
Sure. So, I mean, it goes way back. My dad was not a photographer, but he had a darkroom, and I was very interested in photography. And I had the opportunity, going way back in high school, to take 3 years of photography in high school. And I came out of high school as one of the top young photographers in the U.S. through Scholastics. And I ended up going off to Center for Creative Studies for my degree in photography. And I immediately, during that time, started working in the newspapers. And I spent a good 20 years as a media photographer, and then eventually getting more and more into the commercial side and so forth. But then, of course, the Great Recession happened, and at the same time, I also was an internet geek. I had Rosh.com. I mean, I was, really involved. I mean, back to the bulletin board days. So I kept that technology side right along my photography, and I helped to grow my photography business using that technology. And when the Great Recession came along, it gave me an opportunity to start sharing that information with photographers. And then in 2010, this young photographer started connecting with me, and we were chatting, and I had the opportunity to meet her in New York, and interviewed her immediately. She had so much energy, and her name is Lindsay Adler. And I like to say I knew Lindsay Adler before she was Lindsay Adler. And we became friends, and even further, and ended up writing the first book on digital marketing and social media for photographers in 2010. And, our careers continued on from there. Obviously, if you haven't heard of Lindsay Adler these days, she certainly has become a force out there. That's for sure. And I've written a few books since then, and I've continued. I have gone more mainstream in some areas of my photography, as well as my consulting and my marketing. So I have a media company now that involves visual, obviously, photography, video, and so forth, as well as the digital marketing. And that's where I am today, and continue to grow. The business is growing. Obviously, the photography certainly took a step back, but is not dead. I certainly have been doing some projects or had some things to do, which we can talk about moving forward. And actually, I'm pretty excited about what's ahead this summer. I've spent the time with some business plans and taken on some new ideas and concepts for some new visual opportunities. So I'm happy to share that with you too.
Well, there's so much that you just talked about, but I don't want to turn this into a podcast where we talked about everything that Rosh did in his background. But it is funny you brought up Lindsay, because Shamir and I had Lindsay on this podcast probably 2 years ago. Does that sound about right?
Something like that.
And yeah, I mean, wow. I've known Lindsay for a while, not as long as you have, but I'm blown away by the fact that at 15 she started her business.
Yeah,
and that's part of the story that's amazing. But if I look at what drives Lindsay, if I look at what drives a lot of other photographers that all three of us here have an incredible respect for, it's their ability to diversify. Within and sometimes without outside of their skill set, through partnerships and other programs. And right now, we've got everybody out there dealing with the pandemic. We've got probably, I would say, at least 2/3 to 75% of photographers out there that are walking around their homes looking like a deer caught in the headlights, trying to figure out what to do. And then there are some of us that are sitting there, and we may not know what to do yet. But for example, I'm struck by the number of opportunities there are for photographers, because everybody now, whether you want to admit it or not, is a victim of the pandemic. You can't change that. It happened. It wasn't in our control, and we're all victims. But that also means there's an opportunity for everybody to essentially rebuild their presence. Yes. This is not their business or their reputation, because hopefully you had something going there to begin with. But What's your feeling on the opportunities that are most relevant right now for photographers, not just as artists, but also as small business owners to stand out?
Sure. Well, there's more than ever. I mean, the one thing I've been talking about lately, I mean, you guys probably remember the turn of the century, 2000s, and, digital really coming into play. And how, I'm sure of a number of photographers who quit during that time because of the change. And I knew a number of photographers who were just like, everything's changing, this digital thing, this is crazy, this is just wrong, the thing is, there's one constant in photography, of course, and we know what that is: change. Well, there are two constants: change, and the second one is photographers complaining about the change. That's always the case. I mean, it is different today than it was 20 years ago. But those people 20 years ago who were in digital and were all high and mighty, looking at those analog photographers saying, you're just not with the times, are today trying to figure out what to do next and are complaining and wondering, what happened to 20 years ago. And the photographers 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 20 years from now are going to be complaining, wishing it was the good old days of 20 years ago. And I think a lot of photographers get in their groove, they get a business model together, and they think that's the way it's going to be forever. And it's not. It will always change. And if you want to be relevant 5 years from now, you have to understand what is changing. There's more opportunity than ever for visual artists. Maybe not the same type of image creation it was before and the same needs, because what is often changing is the accessibility to photography. The way photographers created images in 1850 is much different than 1950 and will be different in 2050. It continuously changes. So we have things such as augmented reality. That's something I'm really excited about, because that's a lot of video, as well as even design, and even in still photography, all meshed into one. Think of it this way. Think of handing over your business card. Think of it, someone looking at your business card saying, "Where's your presentation?" What do you mean? Well, everybody's phone now automatically clicks on QR codes. And I know I say, wait a minute, QR codes are so dead. And no, it's just the beginning. Because that QR code will trigger to a website which will automatically make your business card come alive. And this is the new website. And that business card will have buttons and has, video, and your portfolio has everything right there, just like your business, just like a website if you want it to be. It could be you talking, explaining who you are, adding more dimension. Think of a real estate agent who, they give you those calendars. You could put your phone up to them and trigger, and next thing you know, the face on that calendar is talking to you, telling you about the latest in housing, what's available locally. I mean, anything can be triggered. It could be on the side of a building. Well, this is giving photographers and videographers, if played right, a wonderful opportunity for regular updated content, more content that's needed. There's more content needed online, for social. I know a lot of photographers are listening to this, photographer websites and other social. So there's so many. I could go on for an hour, and I'll stop for the moment. But there is so much available today. But you have to think about what's next, not trying to hold on to what was.
It's funny when you talked about a little bit of the history of photography. For years, when I used to do a workshop, I would talk about all those people that complained years and years ago about color photography coming in. Now, fortunately, I'm not that old, but they talked about, black and white photographers talked about how the industry's going to hell because now we got color. And then autofocus came in, and I remember Calumet throwing Nikon out because Nikon had refused, had announced they were no longer going to make manual focus lenses, and the world was changing. Yeah. Then came digital, which you mentioned before, and I remember I can't think of who it was. Photographers talking about digital was the next best thing, the next new thing, and you had the same thing again. Now, if you look at, and then the internet came along. And the internet has totally changed the way we share images, but now it's changed the way we communicate. And if you look at all of those, I'm willing to bet if you took a person that is about to give up today because of the pandemic, or they gave up because digital became a product and something they need to look at 10 years ago, if you go back through their family history, you'll find somewhere one of their relatives that first complained about color from black and white. And if you really think about it, we are very close to the scene in the first Star Wars movie where R2-D2 pops up the holograph of Princess Leia, telling Command what's coming. We're there.
Yeah. So absolutely.
It's just remarkable in terms of where the opportunities are. And I find it, I don't know how you deal with it, because I find it outrageously frustrating when I get photographers that want to throw in the towel. Now, if they want to throw in the towel and you're looking at the fact that they've just lost interest, or maybe they didn't love it to begin with. But if you've got the passion for this, then there's that old line about, before you give up, remember what kept you going this long in the first place.
Right.
And I hate seeing people give up when they're on the 1 yard line so close to a touchdown. Boy, I just threw in a whole bunch of anecdotal points on that one.
No, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, look, the imagery has never been more needed today. And I bet I said that in 2014 on the last podcast, and it's even greater today. Now, granted, there are more photographers, more competition, but that leads to the idea of your and in the combination code. You need to separate yourself from the competition. Again, just doing average work is not going to get you where you want to go, but there is more opportunity. And honestly, the reality is there has been, the reality is in this crisis, we can't get out there. We can't meet with people in the same way we could just a few months ago. And that's something, different than the Great Recession. The Great Recession, had to do with maybe working a little bit harder, making adjustments, but getting out there. Being stuck at home kind of is a different issue, but it is an opportunity for you to start thinking about writing down all the ways that you can combine your photography, your core strengths with something new. And maybe learn what that something new is. Someone may be listening to augmented reality or virtual reality, or, I know nothing about that. Well, you knew nothing about Photoshop at one time, too. And you may want to take the time to discover what those things are that you can apply and combine with your photography so you can come out of the gate running with something that people will desire.
So this is super interesting. Let's dig into this a little bit more, because I'm sure there are listeners who are wondering, well, how do we, and you've kind of started to dig into this a little bit, but let's dig deeper. The process of discovering our and taking advantage of these new opportunities as our industry changes as a whole. For the photographer who's listening, and this is partially for myself too, because every guest we have on the show, I'm always taking notes and learning, how to refine my own business. For someone who's listening who has no idea what their and could be or should be, how do they go about discovering that? What's the process?
Well, sure. The first step is to understand what your core is. Who are you? What are you best at? And then taking it from there. And one thing I often say is, I'll get to that in a moment, but take that core and start looking at fashion, start looking at design, start looking at technology. Technology is a big one. And, you don't have to totally reinvent things, but you can certainly apply maybe trends that are out there in the world that you could apply to what you are doing in a way that other people are not, or few are not. You can always find inspiration for other people. Look in different industries. What's going on within another industry? Is there something happening within an industry that your photography could help, here's the big word, solve problems? And if you can be out there for them. See, a lot of times we're in the photography. I love photography. I love creating images, and everybody should just love the images I create. Let me tell you something. We how many beautiful, incredible, amazing, and I'm sure you've talked about it many times before, amazing photographs that are created on a smartphone and posted to Instagram. I mean, we're inundated with tons of great photography, so it has to be different. Good quality composition and lighting and, in focus is not the key to photography. It used to be. I mean, it used to be a magic black box. And coming out just competent seemed to work pretty well for quite a few years, but that's not the way anymore. So you do need to think, and you can start thinking of extremes. I like to use the example of like, what if I could? And honestly, that's what I often have done with, especially technology. And, in the early days, just thinking, I can't wait until I can print my first card, 4x6 card, to share with people so they can see my images and I can update it all the time. And that would be such an advantage. And I was doing this when I literally had to take a slot, find a company that had a high density monitor and create a slide from it and then have prints made from that. And then it just over time kept getting better and easier to do such things. And now all we have to do is upload it to Photo Shelter or wherever you want and just have it printed or go to your local, things like that are like second nature now. But you have to be that far ahead that you're thinking, what if I could do this? What do I need to do to make it a reality? Thinking of those extremes. That's what Amazon does. I hate to use that same old, cliche, but that's what they're always doing. Not just can we deliver this, but can we deliver it faster? Hey, why don't we try using drones? That kind of thinking. What can you do with your photography with the new technology that's available? Or use the extreme thought process, write these extreme ideas down, don't stop, and then figure out what's available. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of great developers out there who have these little just software things that you could apply that nobody's really using that could totally make you different. And just know that great thing that's making you different now, you're going to have to change that in a few years. It's always changing. You have to keep going through that process.
This brings to mind the work of Suzette Allen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, photographer, educator. She's amazing. She started doing these hybrid moving portraits. And It's something that it's different, and I'm seeing it a bit more and more now as it catches on with photographers, but it's just a way to add a bit of uniqueness to her portraits. And I mean, that's a way of using software to stand out a bit in the market.
Right. Absolutely right. That's a great example.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Suzette because it triggered another thought here. We've often referred to Suzette as the queen of hybrid. At the time she got that title, the definition of hybrid was simply still images combined with video, combined with music. And that was the definition of hybrid. Well, now it's extended even more in how you deliver. And you were talking about, virtual reality and changing and grasping all these new concepts. In a world right now where we all suddenly live in cyberspace. Yeah. That's where we all are. We're all hunkered down, and I keep saying this. In fact, I'm tired of using the expression "hunkered down." It was never in my vocabulary before, and now it comes up, 10 times a day. But if you think about everybody having to hunker down, there are too many artists out there that think that means their business too, and hit on if you're comfortable with it. Hit on some things that photographers could easily do as they're learning and starting to understand where they can create that magic combination. And what are things they can do to keep building the relationships with their clients and remind them that, hey, I'm still here?
Well, that's a great question, because that's something that I have been talking with a number of photographers about. I mean, the key in all this, and I said this, and just as we're all shutting down, the key to having a business at the end of this is communication. When I talk about marketing, there are 4 areas. I talk about awareness, traffic, conversions, and retention. And retention is the play that a lot of people forget about. But retention is what we've needed to work with over these next over these months of, to keep in touch, keep in communication, keep following up. Right now is the time to start following up with older clients, to start putting new images, or maybe start creating new images the best you can with what you have. Maybe you're stuck with just family members right now, to create some new concepts and start to post that within social to get the conversation going. If you have some older stuff where maybe time to tag a few people who might be ripe for opportunity when the doors open. For some of you, it's in a few days. Maybe it's open now. For us here in Michigan, we got a couple more weeks to go. But it really is important to keep things moving, keep yourself motivated, because if heads in the sand and you're worried and you're not doing anything, even with the time left, you're going to be behind. You're going to be behind. You have to be ready to go and let people know how you're going to do business differently as you open up. I mean, I think a lot of people are forgetting that this world is different. And people will judge you and maybe even hire you as a photographer based on the protocols that you are presenting to them in this process of reopening. I wear a mask always. You will wear a mask when you come into the studio, but you'll take it off, obviously, for your photograph. But presenting that information, we have hand sanitizer there for you. We have this and that. Just listing everything, being very clear to make people comfortable to hire you right now. And there are people who are in need of a photographer, but maybe not ready or comfortable to hire yet. And you want to bring that barrier down as quickly as possible. And that's going to take good communication.
This is so true. We were talking to, and I hope, Skip, you don't mind me mentioning this before the interview's even released, but yesterday we recorded with Cindy Harder-Sims, photographer, who does a lot of infant baby portraits. And she was talking about how she's changed her procedures to make sure that the mothers are comfortable with getting portraits of their delicate babies, and she says that she follows their lead with their comfort level. And some mothers are like, you stay way over there as you take portraits of my baby, and she does, and the masks and everything, and it's so true. It's now more than ever so important that we make sure that our clients moving forward are comfortable. It's a given that your photography should be amazing. That's, that's no question. But what's going to help you stand out, especially now, is making sure that your clients know that with this pandemic, you are taking safety measures to ensure their safety while still making amazing portraits.
And that's just going to be standard. You're going to have to do that. And that kind of leads into the whole conversation about service. And I like to throw this in there because some people are thinking, oh, I know my combination. It's going to be great service. I'm going to offer the best service than any other photographer. No, service just is. Yeah. Other people can talk about your service, and that's great. Have the kind of service that people will talk about, and that will help your photography, but it can't come from you. It can't be in your literature. That is not your marketing. It is not about your great service, because that just should be in the first place. And then, service is just proven by your actions, and that will help you. But again, it's not your combination, it's not your and it's not how you lead with your marketing, nor do they care how long you've been in business.
Well, I'm glad Shamira brought up Cindy Harder-Sims, because Cindy hit on something in this pod. This is funny because Shamira and I are both talking about it, and it doesn't come out for another couple of weeks. But Cindy also talked about something you just said a minute ago about going back to all of her old clients. Now, she's in a small town in Georgia, and she went back to all of her clients and made a request to them of just planting the seed of ideas, gifts of photographs. I've got all these images of you and your family. Now is the time that I need you to buy one because I need your help in order to stay in business. And she was very open, as only as Cindy can do. But she's built up such a reputation in the community going back to our older clients and saying, hey, what are you doing for Mother's Day? We've got Father's Day coming up next month, and here's the perfect opportunity to get it out there and to have another opportunity. What are you going to get Dad for Father's Day? And there's so many opportunities for photographers to now go back to their older clients. And that's another piece. And I don't know if you get frustrated with this, but I get so irritated with photographers that are screaming about how they have to find new business, which I agree they do, but not at the expense of forgetting the gold mine you've got of great customers from the past. You've built up this reputation, and you're sitting there with all these previous clients. Now is the time to do something fun for them. And maybe it is taking advantage of all the new technologies. And this is going to be a great year, by the way, for video holiday cards. I'm always telling photographers, no photographer should ever send out a Hallmark card, but one with your own image. Well, this is the year that sending out a video holiday card with a great message is going to become even more important, because it lands on everybody's doorstep in cyberspace.
And not only that, with the AR, it can now also come to life. Right on the front of it. You could send a card, and it could be a holiday card, but it could also be triggered to actually have a full message and everything. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much opportunity. And as I mentioned before, awareness, traffic, conversions, retention, and that retention play, you work so hard to develop awareness, traffic, and conversions and get these clients that so many photographers, business people in general, just forget about the retention and going back to the people who are already sold on them, people who already trust them, people who already like them. I'm sure we've heard that scenario before. And those are the people who are your best. If they are not ready to buy from you again, maybe they don't want a new portrait or have any need, but they are certainly your best referral source by just asking, who do you know? And going from there. And these people already trust you, be more than happy to refer you.
I can't remember the stat, but it's been proven that those that have already done business with you are vastly more likely to purchase from you again, rather than finding someone new, someone untested. And of course, it's a given. You have to do your job and make sure they, like you, trust you. Don't be a jerk during the portrait session, create good portraits, but getting them to come back and rebook from you, or even, like you said, referrals. That's so valuable. And people seem to value a referral from someone they know, a family member or a friend, much more than just looking up a photographer on Google and hoping that this person will be, a good photographer. So, so true. So true. And I'm curious, so you mentioned, you kind of alluded to this earlier in the interview, and I think you've also touched on it throughout, but it sounded like you had some interesting plans and strategies for moving forward for the future with your business. Could you touch on those?
Sure. Well, that definitely is the augmented reality, because, me and everyone on my team, can now create a card. I mean, you'd be amazed when you show somebody this business card, and now it's a video, and they did it with their phone, and it was very easy. They want one too. So we're really at the point of making this kind of, where websites were about 95, 96, that's where this is. And this is very intentional. And so it's like the next type of website, kind of like we have multiple ways to communicate. You can message, you can text, you can call by phone, you can email. There's more than one way, and there's more than one type of website now. And that's the way I look at it. So but I see all the great opportunity there for video, especially. But because we've obviously done some tests and starting to put all this together, and creating multiple videos that are on one card and people can watch different messages. It's a lot of work, especially something like this needs to be updated regularly, so it's also regular work. But there is VR opportunities, there are other types of software opportunities out there and needs online. So there is so much to be done. I'm very excited about it. I mean, I feel like it's a great new opportunity for my studio to really grow in the next phase. And you know what? A lot of the photography I did 10 years ago, I just don't do anymore. I just don't do. And I'm okay with it. And I think that's the big difference, because there are photographers who are complaining right now that the stuff they did so much, 10 years ago. I know I kind of alluded to this before too, and talked about this before, but the fact is they're just trying to hold on to the past. And if you're going to be a successful photographer, you have to be continuously charging into the future. Otherwise, you just get left in the past and are one of the complaining photographers.
Rosh, if you had to pick just a couple of things that photographers need to start doing right now, what would they be? What would the top 2 or 3 things be?
I think first, understand your core, where you are now. You have to enjoy what you do, of course. I mean, I keep saying charge into the future, be damned all that other stuff. No, you do have to love what you do. And if you're a visual creator, there's a lot of ways to do that. So understand your core, start writing down ideas right now to think of something new to combine with your photography as you start your business for the first time or reopen your business after 20 years, after it's been shut down for a few months. Take this opportunity. And then from there, just keep educating yourself. Learn new ways to do business. I mean, I have my rants, and you've obviously, heard a lot of my rants today, but there are other great photographers with different business ideas that have maybe even better ideas that you can apply to your specific type of photography. So, listen to many different voices and start to test small, see what works, let go of what does not, and keep evolving your photography business from now until you're ready to, hang up the camera, which I think for photographers is never.
So this whole conversation is so interesting. And Rosh, if you could see my notes right now, no joke, I've got a full page of notes, and I'm like running out of space, trying to fit in new ideas and areas. And I love this because you're right. Our photography businesses are always evolving, and you can't change that. And none of us are the same people that we were 10 years ago, and we're not making the same types of images, and the times are always changing, the economy is changing, and this is just such a timely discussion as we all navigate our way through this pandemic, and as economies open up across the country, as you mentioned, some faster than others, some slower than others, like good old Michigan here, but this is cool, and I want to make sure and ask, where can folks find you online to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. RoshSillars.com is a great place to go. I upload a number of my YouTube videos there. You can always go to my YouTube channels. I have a few. I have one dedicated to the photography business and pricing for photographers. And then I have one that's more just creative entrepreneurial. And so you can find those. Rosh.video will actually take you to the entrepreneurial channel, and you can find the others from there. And if you want to contact me at Rosh Sillars, so everything is Rosh Sillars on Twitter. And those 3 ways, that'll get you to me if you need
Perfect.
Any questions or any topics you're interested in. And I have over 1,000 videos on the creative entrepreneurs. So,
very cool. We'll make sure and include links to those in the show notes as well, so that people can definitely check those out. And Skip, where can folks find you?
Oh my God, I thought you'd never ask. Just like I always answer that question, everything I write is skipcohenuniversity.com. My Twitter and my Facebook, nothing creative here, just my name is all under Skip Cohen. And my email address, because we're always looking for feedback and suggestions on new topics or guests you'd like us to have on the show, is skip@mei500.com. And as I always ask, where are they going to find you, Shamira?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, Chamira @photofocus.com. We love getting questions, ideas, feedback, because it certainly shapes how we move forward with this show. And today's discussion was just amazing. Rosh, thank you again. I mean, this is business-changing stuff.
It was an honor. Thank you for having me back on, and let's not wait 6 years next time.
Right?
Exactly. I would agree on that one, especially now where you are so much on the cutting edge. I mean, you were on the cutting edge 6 years ago too, but in fact, I remember going back, and 6 years ago, our biggest discussion was why you should have a blog. I mean, it's really funny how much has changed, and it's also funny how those people that listened and did it right now at least have the foundation for their readers and followers and a better way to hit the target audience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please spread the word about this podcast, especially if you want to improve your photography business and come out stronger than ever from this pandemic. We look forward to having you with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photo Focus and Skip Cohen University.